We'll call the January 5, 2017, first meeting of the new year. Call the meeting to order. The administrator would call the roll.
Begelman?
Here?
Dane?
Here.
French?
Here.
Agensick?
Here.
User?
Here.
Olson?
Yes. Here.
Lane?
Here.
Solheim?
Here.
And Wilson.
Okay, you have the agenda that was sent out to you. Is there a motion for approval? You
Second.
have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor vote yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. And the agenda is approved as distributed. The minutes of the December 1, 2016 meeting were sent out. Do we have a motion for approval?
Have a motion to approve
Second.
December 1st.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say yes.
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 Those opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. Communications, Ben?
Board of Adjustment, we had no meeting in December, so I have nothing to report. Also, no meeting in January. I also have one other item. I did receive notice via email that Mr. Bill Wilson has submitted his desire not to be on the commission anymore due to time obligations with work, I understand. So he is officially not here in that capacity. So he has emailed notification to the mayor. And as such, it's up to the mayor to select an individual to fill that spot.
In that regard, I'd like to encourage the members of the commission. There's no one that knows the work of this commission better than its members. And as you think of people in the community that ought to be considered, you can send me those names, or you can send them directly to the mayor, or send them to Ben. But to identify people that could come on to the commission, that would be appreciated. Item on public hearings, we have none this evening. First item of regular business is a review and recommendation on a minor subdivision plat on 5th Street Northwest. Mr. Troy Toma, in conjunction with the City of Waverly, is interested in creating Parcel I, a 24,720 square foot, that's about 0.56 acres, parcel located north of 5th Street Northwest and fronting onto the Cedar River. The resulting parcel is part of the Ridgewood Park, a city-maintained park, which the city desires to transfer to Mr. Toma for private maintenance and use. The city, following review and recommendation of the Leisure Services Commission on August 18, 2016, is recommending the plat to Planning and Zoning Commission for review and recommendation to City Council. The land will be private property following council approval of the sale and this minor plat request. Ben, I'm assuming notice went out to people in the vicinity on this, or how does that work?
Well, that's a good question, and actually we did not. This is a minor subdivision plat that does not require notification. Vacating of private property, or public property, to private hands, it does require setting a public hearing, and that will be done at the council. So they will advertise in the newspaper and announce at this upcoming council meeting that this is the desire of the application. And as such, too, the Leisure Services Commission did take this up on August 18, and it was revealed that Leisure Services Director Tab Ray has indicated that due to the additional lots that were acquired with the flood buyouts resulting from 2008, we purchased 69 lots, I believe it is, 69 properties. So due to that additional workload, and also the area in question is generally wet on a regular basis, I understand, during the spring months. And it's, frankly, according to their office, hard to maintain. So it may be better served to allocate it to the neighboring property owner who approached the city about this request, so that he and she, the property owners there would maintain the property and have the riverfront access, which they currently do not have.
We're talking about for themselves.
For themselves, a private,
Okay.
private access area. So as such, too, the price is generally based upon the last sale. So what they've done is they've calculated out the last known sale, and it equates to, from a few years ago, to about 24 cents a square foot. It was the proposed price, and so as such, calculating the per square foot price with the square footage total, that's where we end up with the amount that's being proposed to our city council. So they'll have to undertake that into consideration, and what they're seeking now is guidance from the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of land use. Is this appropriate? Does this make sense? Things of that nature is the purview of the Planning Commission.
And it'll remain zoned as it currently is, as U1?
That's correct. I believe that is the zoning. Yeah, I think I got the zoning map there for you. So yes.
U1 would mean they aren't able to build structures on it. It remains kind of unusable land in a way.
That's correct. It's continually wet. Yeah, it's generally the floodway, we call it. Generally, the water will ebb and flow into that area. So as such, too, we have floodplain maps that would supersede our zoning district, too. So you're correct, Heidi, that we wouldn't allow any structures in that area. We could allow for boat docks, things of that nature, but not an actual structure with a roof on it.
So the potential purchaser, is it the house directly
It'd be to the south.
south of that? Okay.
Yep.
So it's just, it'd be a long,
Yeah, so if you were to square it off, for lack of a better term, and go straight, in this case, straight north from that south property, that's essentially what they're looking to gain, is just go straight north to meet up with the Cedar River bank.
Are we setting a precedence here that we really don't want to set, taking park land and converting it to private property? What's to prevent the rest of Ridgeway Park to
That's a
actually
good question.
disappear?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know, for a little bit of background, if you look on the survey, I believe you can see an existing parcel to the east of what's being proposed there, and that was the parcel in question, the parcel D, I believe they call it. That actually was the one that was allocated previously. I think it was 2012, I believe the letter says, from Leisure Services. Yeah, 2012, they undertook that action, and City Council approved of that sale. So, I mean, it's a good question. It's a valid point. So I guess from a land use perspective too, and policy-wise, what are your thoughts on that?
Is it parkland that is used regularly, or is it kind of vacant parkland?
Well, it's vacant parkland. I understand there's no improvements on there. I understand they haven't made provisions or plans, from what I understand in talking with the Director Tab Ray, that this area could be improved as a potential, riverfront access area. I know as a city, though, we have constantly talked about we're looking for locations for people to put in and take out their canoes, kayaks, and boats.
Mm-hmm.
So establishing a water trail, and I don't know if this area would be conducive for that or not. It's kind of a dead-end street that leads into this park. It's an unimproved park for the most part. I understand it's an open area. Other than that, I don't know if there's any other improvements on the property.
it's getting pretty close to the boat ramp is just feet from there, isn't it? I mean,
It's on the other side of the bridge.
right, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's very close to an inlet for canoes and some of the other items that way.
And are you talking by this location here, or okay?
Yeah, I
to
mean,
the
this-
west.
By the Adams Avenue Bridge. by
Yeah. So I mean, this property is not far from there. It's just right on that curve on the other side of the bridge.
Correct, it is, yes.
So the benefit of putting some type of a canoe launch there or something when it's, 300 feet or whatever from the ramp might not make sense or be necessary that way. I don't know.
But the thing is, in the kayaking trips I've taken, this would be a much better place to launch or, bring in your canoes, because there's a lot more space there, and it's sloped enough that you're not ending up trying to get 5 canoes up in an area that's only 5 feet wide.
But there's a lot of frontage along that Ridgeway Park. I mean, if you go back to the west, there's quite a few feet of frontage there. That's in the park.
guess one of my questions been regarding the property line. Will it end at the riverbank, or will it proceed into the river, as we've discussed a couple of years ago? We had concerns about if we're ever to improve the river, the flow, whatever, and property owners own the midline, that ties our hands. Are we giving away that property line, or is it going to stop at the bank?
I understand it will be stopped at the bank, for lack of a better term. I know with the survey, it does follow the bank. And there is additional property that's designated. For example, you see a green line on the plat, on the color plat, that from the Bremer County Assessor Office there, when you're looking at that, that's actually property ownership too. To be frank, I don't know what the surveying standards are that would establish that. But I know in this particular case, though, it would be up to the bank, is what the surveyor has proposed as parcel I.
And that's well-defined within the documentation.
Yeah, it would be generally a meets and bound description that would generally follow the bank, give or take a foot or two, but because it meanders somewhat.
How far to the west does Ridgeway Park go? Northwest.
I don't know. I can bring it up on the assessor map here. While I look that up, is there any other questions?
Ben, the access to Ridgewood Park, I'm talking about the remainder of Ridgewood Park then would be from Greenfield. There's a cul-de-sac at the end of Greenfield that would,
Well, I got the map to look.
it doesn't really show on the aerial map that Beacon provides, but Greenfield goes down there, and there is a cul-de-sac in that area, so there would be other public access to what remains of Ridgewood Park.
There's just FYI, there's approximately 650 feet of riverfront frontage total. So, and just for some scale, you were looking at, for the parcel in question, it's generally about, 170 feet wide. So basically about 5 times more of what you see there, essentially.
So
70 feet.
the owner of the property adjacent would or would not have access to that riverfront there? Because I think I heard you say that's part of the reason for the request, that they want access to the river there, but do they not have that the way it is now?
The way it is now, correct, they do not. They would have to utilize the public property to access the river.
Is that a problem?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's
More of
no...
a maintenance issue from the city's point of view.
Correct. It's purely a maintenance, maybe a liability issue if somebody's putting in at a non-designated spot. Frankly, it's kind of up to I guess you call it a policing matter to say, is that in the public's interest to really monitor that? And I don't know if it's really a concern at this point.
But that is also true of that whole Ridgewood Park area, right?
That's correct. It's a public park, and people can walk up right up to the riverbank and enjoy whatever view they get, or if they want to probably throw in a fishing pole line, or even maybe a canoe. I guess you could, even though it's not a designated spot.
The property to the east is privately held right to the river's edge.
That's correct. And that was the one in 2012 that was previously allocated to them by the Leisure Services Commission, and then council approved of that.
Ben, did they give any reason then as to why we're not keeping the same standard? I mean, all of the other properties that are riverfront go out to some point in the river where they're contiguous to properties that are, I think, primarily owned by the Teat family on the other side of the river. Is there any reason why we've got this void now that I guess city still owns it?
Generally, the river is an open public navigable waters. You know, it's open to the public to enjoy. So it functions as a quasi street, I guess you could say. And the DNR and the city both would kind of govern the river, I guess you could say, to a certain degree. But there's no real hard rules on that I'm aware of that say in the city code that say you cannot utilize the river, you know, at certain points.
It's not a utilization, it's payment of taxes. The people that have the other property, it goes out to the middle of the river, pay taxes on all of that. And this property would not.
So that may be a critique of the proposed parcel I then, the way it's proposed, going out to the bank and not to the middle of the river.
Well, or to the
That's
established
available line.
line, whether it's the middle or halfway out or three-quarters, whatever.
But that would also allow, they would not be able to put a dock out into the water because they don't own that property.
The DNR, frankly, they do require a permit to do that. I'm not sure on the specifics of that, so they may grant them one, even though
They don't
property would
technically
end.
own it.
Yeah, so it's really up to the DNR.
Every dock has to have a permit out into a public waterway, so I mean, you pay a registration, you have to put the number on the dock, and whether it's, even if Teats owned that hole or whatever, they still have to have the dock, because DNR governs the waterway, so.
That's the way I understood it too.
But they don't. Go ahead, please.
On a U, there isn't gonna be much for taxes though, on a U. I mean, if there's, you know,
Then you're referring to the environmentally sensitive district that this potential area is within, right? Because we couldn't permit any kind of structures to be placed there, so it really has low value in terms of that goes, you know, future development goes.
You raise an interesting point, though, because the river itself is controlled by DNR. But if someone is in waders and they're walking in the water on the land that is covered with water, they can be held for trespassing if they don't get permission. If they don't get permission to use that.
And you are correct, Hank, in the sense that the ownership line does go to within probably 20 feet of the shore from across the river. That's what I'm showing. I'm looking at the assessor map.
And it's not regular.
Yeah, it's an irregular line. It meanders. It's about 90 feet, actually, from the bank. 90 to 100 feet from the bank is where the property ownership from across the way starts. There's some silting going on with some of that land, too. So it's a constant process with the shoreline, too. It comes and it goes over the course of decades. So
This maybe goes back to Mary's question, but, not seeing how the rest of the housing in that area really lines up. Are there other property owners along there who would subsequently want to, I'm on the wrong map, okay.
No, this one's,
You pulled that up, okay. Subsequently want to, partition off so that they could purchase river access.
And I'm looking at a map of Bremer County Assessor. I mean, with this property, let's say it's granted access, that would leave realistically maybe 2 total homes that don't have access today on the other side of the Ridgewood Park as it stands today. Because the others to the north of this, at the end of the dead-end street of Greenfield, they all have riverfront access all along there. So essentially there would be 2 left without. There'd be one property on the north side of Greenfield and one property on the south of Greenfield, kind of at the end of that street there. Their property line ownership ends and the park begins, and that separates them from the river. So there would be 2 left. And frankly, if they were to request, riverfront access, that would take probably and arguably more land from the park area. So I don't know how, as a commission, the leisure services would feel about that, nor this commission.
Well, what I don't totally understand is that on the one hand, the city wouldn't mind getting rid of it because they don't have to maintain it. But on the other hand, even though it's not very usable land, is there a reason why the city would ever want to retain that as park land if it's unused?
And frankly, according to our Leisure Services Commission, and they discussed it and they decided that they would recommend approval of giving this land to the adjoining property owner for the stated reasons of saving on maintenance costs in the future, that the land is usually wet and hard to maintain. So based on that, I don't know where we go, but I know that was the recommendation from Leisure Services. So.
But I guess I have a problem with them, getting rid of parkland because it's hard to maintain. Once you lose that, you never get it back. And all parks aren't going to be easy to maintain. They get kind of boring if they're all easy to maintain.
There's always them that don't be.
Maybe a different way of asking that question, what is the value of retaining that as parkland? Is there a good reason to do that? And if not, then I don't have any problem with it. But if there is good reason to retain that particular parkland, even though it is wet, that'd be a different question.
The neighbors probably don't mind getting rid of it because of all the parties and the cops being called down there for parties.
That's the other side, Dave.
What's that?
That's the other side of the
Oh, this part gets problems, yeah. Yeah, the other side and the sand bar, there's problems.
Right.
So does this from the kids.
Did the landowner come to the city and request it, or did Leisure Services go to the landowner and ask him if he was interested?
To be honest, I'm not sure. The person that can answer that is the Leisure Services Director. I understand, I think it was the property owners that approached the city, approached Tabaret about this. That's my understanding. And so the general agreement, the verbal agreement was that they would undertake all of the necessary costs to bring it to this point, and the city would have no cost of preparing plats or recording fees or anything other than reviewing the request.
Or recommending this or not recommending this, it's still going to end up going to city council. I'm thinking, are there any other issues that ought to be surfaced that we haven't looked at, so that when council does meet, they'll have a place to go for reference to take a look at what we talked about.
I guess I would question whether Leisure Services, do they have kind of a strategic plan in place of what they want to do? Because so recently they've given up the area Brent and Dahlstrom purchased. We gave that up as parkland, giving up this part. Do they have an overall structure that they're following to help guide that?
No, it's a good question. They do have, much like we have a comprehensive land use plan, they do have a parks and open space plan. To be fair, I'm not sure on the details of that. But I do know that they are emphasizing the points of continuing maintenance with the current staff levels. It's difficult.
Yeah, I would consider that to be more short-term, though, potentially. I mean, if there isn't a strategic thought in place, it's just as a long-term decision for possibly short-term gain from that. And I'm not really objecting to this area of land. It's just more the concept, because we've had in the last 2 months now, or 3 months, multiple things coming from Leisure Services to relinquish land for the city.
The next nearest park along the river, public park access as you go to the north, is going to be Cedar Bend.
I believe so.
That's where we used to put in the tubes from college, so I'm assuming that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
The float.
So there's no other, and then,
But there's still 500 and some square feet.
yeah,
or
no.
frontage feet here.
Yeah, it's still a fair amount. Of
Yeah, there's a
property.
fair amount of
It's not
acreage
giving up
there
a lot.
still, yeah. I mean, it's a half an acre they're giving up, I think, is all it is, and it's underwater a lot, too.
Well, it's also not the piece of property most convenient to the parking at the bottom of Greenfield Street. So it's probably the least used piece of the property, except maybe for the partiers.
Partiers need time, need space too.
Then a procedural question. If we vote in the affirmative, the recommendation goes to city council. If we have a split vote, tie vote, that would also go to city council. But does it change their requirement on a majority?
Yep, it does. It would require a supermajority at that point, a 2/3 vote of the number of seats, not necessarily members present, but the number of seats.
Okay.
We were just talking about the places to let in. We also have Pelican Park, which is not too far, another area with access, full access.
That would be along Cedar Lane on the north side of the Cedar River.
Yeah, but that'd be before you got out into the county to Cedar Bend.
Right, and people put in there a lot, actually.
But again, just the precedence of giving up more parkland, it's a problem.
I hear you. I think it's a valid concern.
And I think it's something that, we maybe can send that message back to the leisure services, that we really want to understand kind of what the long-term plan and what constitutes a park, how that all works together.
And frankly, I believe that's in the purview of this body. I mean, that's why you guys are discussing this from a land use perspective of this land is park land, and shall it be given to private ownership? Yes or no? And what's the value? What are the merits? What are the impacts to the neighborhood and to the city at large?
So if we were to support this, the rationale from the perspective of looking back on why did we approve this, the rationale would be?
I thought you were going to finish the sentence.
I'm not.
Feel free to fill it in.
I think that's a good point. Is there rationale at this point from the information we have to say, we're never going to use this this area again, go ahead, but without a comprehensive plan of how that works, I struggle a little bit.
So it's wet.
But so is Coleman Park at times.
This
This is way wet.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into a huge discussion, but they maintained on that Dahlstrom thing what they would have originally had for park spot, because the actual number of acres with the area that they are still going to have a park and with the trail is going to be equal to what they would have had on a percentage basis. It was just that the rest of that was made into a driving range and gave it to the city on that part of it, so I don't know if they really gave up more than they would have had in the long run.
I do know there's a lot of the area that's just, frankly, they call it a no-mow area. They don't even really mow it. They may knock it down once or twice a year, but it's really, tall grass.
So does maintenance really play much of a role into this land either? I mean, I'm assuming the landowner's using it at times, just as anyone who kind of butts up to the park, you lose that barrier. It may depend whether or not if they do something to it.
Yeah, like I said, there's no real improvements in the area. Just an open grassy area with some trees to enjoy the river view. That's really what's there. And I know there's a little walking trail, but other than that, that's about it.
I guess in my thoughts, I like the fact, and Hank, if you disagree with me, I'd love to hear more. I like the idea of the fact that the city's maintaining ownership in the river rather than the property owner. Because I think there will be a time when something has to be done with the river, and giving more ownership up of that waterway concerns me. So I like that piece of this particular puzzle. With leaving 500 foot of frontage there for the park, I'm comfortable with that. And prior to the Dahlstrom issue, was 2 years ago, we actually acquired a park for the city at the end of First Street, where Heckroth used to live down there. So we've seen it expand.
Was it Riggs?
Riggs, that's it. where Riggs had lived, and, so we saw an expansion, now it's a little contraction. The governing body that oversees those parks says we should do it. I don't see a shortage of land or park in the city. So to me, the rationale is it makes sense to the people that are most responsible. It makes sense to me in that we're controlling the waterways still as much as the DNR allows it. And I support it.
I think DNR, if it's anything like our lake home, our property goes into the lake, but from the water line back, I think it's 6 feet, the DNR controls, what you can do as far as anything on that shoreline, even though our property goes into the lake, I think, 10 feet or so, so you can't, put a boathouse or anything past that certain shoreline area. So I think even though you might own that into the ground, I think because it's a body of water that the DNR controls, I think you're just limited to what you can do with it too. So I mean,
Yeah, I don't know this, but I think you're right. I don't think you could build a structure even though you own the land on it without getting permission. But the ownership of that land, I believe, it sounds like it's conflicted, but I don't think so. It's a trespassing issue. If somebody were to be walking, wading down or fishing off of your site, be interesting to get that clarified.
yeah, and in this area, it wouldn't even be a floodable area. I mean, so
Right.
it's not even U area. So DNR, I mean, they slap your hands if you even if you put in some columns just to support a dock or tie it to, they won't let you really do that either.
Ben, the one thing I'd like to see with this is some consideration on putting the entire plot into the deal so that they own it the way it's already benched out to some place out in the river, and that we sell that the way a homeowner buying upstream doesn't have an option of whether they can buy the river part of it or not. It comes with the package, and I'm wondering why we would not want to do that here. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but somebody ought to be thinking about it.
It's probably because they didn't do it on the last one. The last one looks like it's right at the water edge.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're correct, and actually I asked the surveyor why they are proposing it this way, and frankly it was a matter of it was probably the easier place to establish a boundary was along the bank rather than going into the middle of a river. And you know what I mean?
You don't want to go out there in
And
the cold
that's-
weather.
You can describe it, but yeah, he just said it was more
Frozen yet?
practical. From what I understand, I don't know surveying law or methods, but I understand that
It could change
it was kind of a choice when they chose to do it this way.
pushes it out too.
Yeah.
So in the long term, and I've heard this just different times through the city, and not that it's something we're ever going to do, but if we ever wanted to make more of a water, more of a significant pool of water for people to do more recreational, if we would do that and this land would become flooded, would we need to, as a city, compensate or do something for anything that's flooded in those situations?
You mean on the
That making
private
sense.
property side?
On the so now it becomes private property. We do something to raise the river level up for more recreational use. Are we now buying land back or doing something to? I don't know. It wasn't that long ago, just a recent meeting, we talked about doing something like that.
And maybe two owners down the line, they won't remember this happened, and they're going to just say, hey, I own that. They don't know the backstory of the history. It could be. I mean, they could challenge it. But,
Well, even this owner.
right.
I mean,
They
I just
could.
paid you money
Yeah.
2017, and now I don't have access to that property.
I can tell you for a fact that there are people on the river contiguous to this park who have lost several feet of waterfront over the years, and there is no compensation that they receive for losing that.
Yeah, because right farther up, Mike Jonkey
Mm-hmm.
had that issue.
But is that more of a natural erosion versus us? Did we make that happen?
This is a result of wave action caused by people who tear up and down the river at excessive speed.
Sure, but it's not something the
We're
city
not talking
necessarily-
about normal pleasure boating. We're talking about significant wakes that are created. And over the years, it hasn't taken that many years, but 2 to 3 feet is a commonly used number for that.
But the majority of that piece of property is already in the floodplain anyway, so,
It's already not
Oh, yeah.
usable.
yeah. That dotted blue line is the floodplain line, so.
But the way
Well, I
leisure,
will-
go ahead.
I'll get it on the table, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the minor plat creating parcel I as described in the attached plat of survey provided by Hoosier Land Surveying dated October 1st, 2016.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Then, when we get to the vote, I'm going to ask you to do a roll call on this one.
Okay.
How about other comments? Rich?
Heidi just brought up an excellent point, and we talked a long time ago about how we really capitalize on the asset we have in this town, which is the river. And whether we made a chain of lakes, whether we move it into increased recreational opportunity, are we going to end up buying it back? Owning it today, which we currently do, not having a certain plan of what the future will hold, that has brought up some old discussions that we've had, and I tend to have been swayed and think that we really don't want to be giving this waterway right-of-way up at this point without a long-term plan.
Other comments?
If this were voted down, then what happens? How long would it be before this could come back?
No.
How
We're
it
done-
works, Kathy.
We're done
Yep.
tonight.
Yep, it goes to council with a, let's say, I don't know how the vote will turn out, but if it doesn't get a majority vote, or it's a split vote, it's a recommended of denial. And when it goes to council, it requires 2/3 majority vote versus the majority. A super majority, excuse me.
Because we gave it a thumbs down.
Correct. Yep. So it still goes forward, and frankly, it's up to the applicant if they want to, but that's usually how the process works. Yep.
It'd be 5 out of 7 versus 4.
Correct.
You ready for the question? We have a motion and a second. Ben,
Okay,
please.
we'll do alphabetical backwards. Solheim,
Hoping you'd start the other way.
I'll start the other way if you want, let her think.
okay, let's go.
No, I can do it.
Where will the fate go?
Yeah, I
Wheel
say
of
no.
Fate. Okay, no. Payne,
No.
Olson,
No.
Huser,
Yes.
Hagensick,
No.
French,
No.
Dane,
No.
Bagelman.
No.
Okay. Motion fails. 1 to.
But let's make sure that the neighbors know so that they can come to that city council meeting, and then it'll give them a good airing.
That's a good point.
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to see potentially the leisure service, and maybe he would have been doing that, but for him to state the case, maybe there's other things we don't understand, but I don't know, maybe that's not necessary, but that is their focus area.
I think it would be helpful to see what leisure services has planned, long-term, short-term, whatever, in terms of park development.
And not that it's necessarily at that, but I think we need to understand that as a committee. And I'm not sure that our most recent planning that we just went into with Intercog is, got specific enough to really look at some of
Yeah.
that.
Their most recent plan, I think, is the 2011 plan that is incorporated into the comprehensive land use plan. We included leisure services and the what then was the Hazard Mitigation River Use Commission. Their reports were included in that earlier document.
Maybe
And I would
where
assume
they're-
some
yeah.
things have changed, yeah.
Right, but what are their strategic, so if they had to identify the top 5 strategic priorities when it comes to recreation land use in our community, what are those? And how does that work together? I think just as a community member, I'd be very interested in seeing that.
And we do have that document. I don't think it's online. It's a rather large document. I've been after, I've been trying to get that online, but I haven't seen it online. So, but I have the document available in my office. Leisure Services also has a copy. If you'd like to stop by and look, more than happy to share it. I can see if I can scan it and email it to everybody too, just for future reference. But
Okay, let's move to item number 2, review and comments on minor subdivision request for property located outside Waverly city limits and within 2 miles of the city limits. Per state code, request for land subdivision in the county within 2 miles of the city limits shall be brought forward to the City Planning and Zoning Commission for review and comments prior to the county taking action. The request is to create one parcel D, a 1.89 acre parcel located on the west side of U.S. Highway 218, approximately 0.5 miles north of the intersection of Highway 218 and 210th Street northwest of the current Waverly city limits. The property will access Highway 218 by means of a shared 66-foot wide easement. The area is not part of the indicated areas of the Waverly future land use map.
so where we're at with this is northwest of the interchange of the Business 218, the road that takes you past the Waverly Airport. As that enters onto U.S. Highway 218, this parcel is north and west of that intersection. So it's substantially out of the city limits. It's at least a mile away as the crow flies. And as staff, we don't really have any concern about this.
And the only question I had on this is that I went on Google Earth, didn't take time to drive out there, but I went to Google Earth, and there are 3 structures on that property, or at least there were at the time the Google Earth photo was taken. The road, the access road is parallel to 218 going to the north, and then it has an access point. They're calling it Badger Road or Badger Avenue or something. Anyway, that has access to 218 both north and south. So I was wondering, are the buildings that are on there, are they proposing to take those down and replace it with a new construction, or?
I am not sure. My hunch is it may be for a buildable site, but I'm not 100% on that because I know the zoning is an A2, which means they could place a residence on it.
Mm-hmm. And they want to keep it that way?
Yes. Yep.
When we did the last strategic plan, we talked about the potential for a commercial district out there, be it trucking or something that would make perfect sense to run out 210th. And where this is located, I don't see that being detrimental to our thoughts and what the future might hold. I don't see a reason to object.
I have no concerns.
All right. And again, we're not asking for a motion, we're just asking for comments, so we can forward them on to Bremer County and.
And my comment was for my own curiosity, whether they were going to tear down or whether I had a site just south of where they're planning to put this one. It's hard to tell.
It might be just south, because I see the existing buildings just south of the proposed site on this aerial that, from Beacon. Let me see if I can get this to work. But anyway, staff really doesn't have any concern about this. It's
I'm-
far enough out, we don't have to worry about servicing this or
Kathy,
anything.
Dave,
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
anything?
I'm fine.
We're good. Old business. Meeting by the commission was held on December 20, 2016, to discuss the future land use map and any modifications to said map.
Yeah, we had a few commissioners show up. Thank you for everybody that attended. And we looked at maps of the future land use plan, and what we did is we had 3 tables going, and everybody took turns in sketching out potential amendments to the future land use map. Amendments included maybe removing some properties west of the tracks in northwest Waverly that are shown as residential, kind of pulling back that area because the practicality of servicing that area is going to be very, very hard. And so, help me out if I'm missing something, everybody that attended. But I know generally there was 3 groups essentially that were formed at that meeting. And so collectively, all 3 documents, when they were done, were sent to Intercog, and they will compile everything and come back to this body in February with their proposal of what captured our thoughts at that meeting, so that we can propose an amendment to that it should last us till 2020, where then we could do a full-blown assessment of our future land use and invite the public to participate and do more of a full public participation component to that to gain the consensus of the community.
I know the area or the table I sat at, we really looked at like roads, proposed roads and different things and what roads make sense for future growth and not. So I think that was helpful. And then with that came some possible zoning changes or recommendations that way that, should this really be residential or is it more of a mix to commercial and that. So it was a good discussion.
I wasn't able to go to the meeting on the 20th, but the sense of the 2 previous meetings were that we were pretty much on track of doing the things that we said were most important during this 10-year period between the major pieces, and the idea of tweaking it to make sure that things that are no longer relevant after 4 or 5 years, that we say so and we get on with the stuff that's more important. But I saw it as being a good experience.
And frankly, you just hit the nail on the head, Hank. We've checked off everything, frankly, that was on the list to do, that was on a future land use plan as far as goals and objectives. We're evaluating the residential district to provide for a mixture of housing. We're doing a lot of items as far as economic development goes in terms of saying what are we doing as a community to foster growth? I mean, what can we do? You obviously want to capitalize on all your strengths, and I think we're doing a good job of that as a community.
Well, something that's coming up in 2020, 2021, pretty much we're doing the major comprehensive land use work on the decade, and it follows the census so that we have census data that is the most recent in order to make certain judgments in that. But the commission needs to be thinking 2020, 2021 is tomorrow in a very real way. And we need to be constantly keeping that in front of us. That plan is doing a lot of good for this community because people know what they can count on. They know what we plan to do in different elements of it. And I think as a commission, you folks have been really responsive in dealing with those things. for a newcomer coming in or a person thinking about putting a business together, having that kind of hard data is invaluable. Comments? There's no new business. But there is a motion to be made,
Motion that we adjourn.
and it is done. Thank you. Good meeting.
It has the power.